Hi, everybody. I'm really on Ali. That's nice. I'm really honored to be here. This group is a staple. This has become a online staple and something that, by virtue of only being 50 kilometers down the highway, I'm awful proud to be somewhat associated with. You're like a beacon around the world, and there are a handful of things that have been put together that have really reached a lot of people and carried a wonderful message of conviviality and fellowship and relationship with God and the power and to ultimately the end objective is to change our lives and not have to drink and perhaps have a shot at a real life, and you guys do that a few times a week, every week. And there's just more and more and more. My friend John coming here to do an 8-week series expanding God consciousness. Like, I'm going to talk to you about some pretty limited God consciousness. He's going to come and clean it all up over 8 weeks and talk to you about an expanded God consciousness. Imagine them calling me an old timer, John. As I sit humbly at your feet. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Ali's right. It's not hard for me to get chopped up and pumped up and sort of all over the place. And it's when this is the second time I've been invited to participate in this format. And I think what I've just gotten into the habit of doing is choosing the shortest sentence of all. What happens is they go to the speakers and they say, what we'd like you to do is pick something in between 86 and 88 or something out of the 12 and 12. And so I just look at, okay, what's the shortest sentence? Because I think to myself, then that will require the less work. I'm just not that bright, you know what I'm saying? So Ali asked me a long time ago, and we nailed down the topic a couple of weeks ago, and that's all I've been thinking about. And here's the beauty of being asked to do this stuff. You guys might not know this, but it's difficult for me to live on a daily basis and in constant contact with my power as it is for anybody. I'm on guard all the time. It still takes vigilance for me to have that relationship. So this topic has driven me to constantly see where I'm either relying upon God or I'm relying upon me. And it's not hard to tell the difference. It's not hard. So where do I want to go with this? I'm pretty full up. I just returned from a weekend retreat, one of my first live events that I've been able to participate in with 24 men up at the St. Francis Retreat Center up in Caledon. And we came in on the Friday night with the proper and dutiful space between us and the masks and don't touch me and hand cleaner all over the place that just made the place reek of alcohol. And within a couple hours, maybe the masks were lowered to the chin and maybe you stepped in a little closer because somebody was talking to you about something that was a little more personal than you could yell across a room. And by Saturday, we were sitting around in our PJs all day, no masks, and we're sitting two guys on a couch, and they had the tables all spread out where you eat one at each end of the table. By Saturday dinner, we were all at the same table, jammed in. Sunday, we're all hugging and loving and crying and spitting on each other. And I got to tell you, it's a beautiful thing to be safe and protected in the lap of God doing this stuff. And I got full. I didn't want it to end, and I just reveled in it all day yesterday on Family Day. And I tried to bring everything that I had sort of the juice that I had been filled up with to some of my members, in which some of them, as you know, have been struggling. And that was my objective yesterday. And then today I had a beautiful day at work, knowing I was coming here, nervous as hell. You always get sort of butterflies. I don't think that's ever going to stop. It feels like it's just because of the responsibility that I'm charged with. It has nothing to do with the pride or ego or anything. That has to do with the responsibility, knowing that there's some people on here that are hurting or suffering, and that the objective really is to give them a little bit of hope that they might be pulled. And I think one of the ways that happens, and Ernie Kurtz and a lot of other people would say, it's through our storytelling. It's the reason why we tell our stories. It's why we share our experience, our strength, and our hope, and that our experience is such a part of it. I'm not talking about drunkalogs, I'm talking about experience. And the book tells us we all do in our each way come together to talk about how we have a relationship with this power. How did it come to pass? Where did it come from there to here? And we have priests and ministers and nuns and individuals that are in here trying to get sober, and some of them can't, who have incredible knowledge of this power, incredible knowledge of God, and they know God's there. They've been laying their lives down for their entire lives at his service. Yet their relationship with God, when they can't get sober, any priest or ministry you ever tried to spend time with or work with will tell you it's just because they've never been able to make that connection. They haven't been connected to God. We in Alcoholics Anonymous have a language of the heart. I think that's actually the language of the heart. I think that's what happens. When one alcoholic gets together with another alcoholic for the purpose of recovery, God seems to be obvious. God seems to enter the room. I don't know what that is. Like, I can get on my knees every single night and do my stuff that I do, the disciplines that I practice, and I can do that stuff. But I'm never closer to God than I am with you. And this weekend was a testament to that. I have missed you so badly. Zoom is great. You know, Bill Wilson said often the good is the enemy of the best. You know, it's a good thing we're all together. The best thing is if we could all be together. That's me. So that's how my relationship with God is really sort of, and to give you proof about whether that is actually even remotely true or not, here's an example. If you come to Alcoholics Anonymous for a little while, you develop friendships in here. Have you ever golfed with other alcoholics? The lying, cheating sacks of shit that they are. Have you ever golfed with other alcoholics? When two alcoholics get together or more to get together for the purpose of golf, there's no God anywhere. They're hitting the ball in the course. They're firing their clubs around, just swearing and cursing. And, there's no God to be found. Us guys, we have our hockey tournament coming up against the same thing. We say the Serenity prayer before every game. At the center ice, we have what we call the Serenity Circle. And we say this, we bring God into the rink. The puck's getting ready. As soon as that puck's dropped, there's no God. There's no God to be found. When any alcoholic gets together with another alcoholic for the purpose of recovery, boom, something happens. So that's what we're doing here. And, I have had a life and a lifetime and a story in Alcoholics Anonymous of a life built on self-reliance. Absolutely no doubt. The way it worked for me was I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1987 because you kept coming to me. I was in prison in my adolescence and my young adult life, and Alcoholics Anonymous kept showing up. People who were trying to probably stay sober themselves were going to institutions and carrying message and bringing in books and talking, and they were having these things they called meetings. And I was going because there was cigarettes and there was coffee and there was outside contact. I didn't have any visitors or any friends and a whole lot going on, but I had that. And so I was rubbing up against you for a long time, and you kept coming to me. You kept bringing the message of AA to me. I didn't come to the doors of AA. So consequently, what happened was when a lot of people know my story. On July the 16th, 87, I had been beaten to an absolute pulp. I had been beaten into a state of reasonableness. I had been brought to my knees and I screamed in a jail cell, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I heard a voice say, you don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. And in that moment on July the 16th, 87, which is my dry date, not my last drink date, it's my dry date. I was on Librium and everything for 10 days. I was out of it. I had no concept or idea where I even was. And on that day, I was fully conscious, and I had that experience. And I knew then that my life had changed. And from then, I felt like that I had made a contact. There had been a contact with this power that I was fully aware existed. Nobody could have ever told me anything else. It was absolutely true. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with a fervor. The desire to drink was gone, but I wanted to be a part of this fellowship. There was no doubt about it. And did I? I was in AA. I had friends and girlfriends and sometimes wives and girlfriends and wives. And I had all of this amazing AA life. I went to meetings all the time. I had a sponsor. I saw him every day at 4:30. I'd show up at his house, knock on his door, and he said, come in, son. And I'd go in and I'd have some apple fritters. We deep fried everything. He was Scottish. We deep fried everything it was. We could deep. I don't know how the hell we didn't die of a heart attack by the time I was 25. Like, we deep fried everything. And we would go to meetings and we sit at meetings, and then we would hear these people who had problems. They had troubles. And we would try to assist them with their troubles. Some of those troubles weren't ours to assist in. And what I mean by that is sometimes we made people's cars disappear for the insurance money. And sometimes we threw people's husbands out of their homes who didn't deserve to be there and put their hand. We help them out of the door. And we got into a lot of trouble. But what we did do is sometimes we'd hear that people didn't have any groceries. So we'd go buy groceries and sit in the middle of the night and a Sobeys would go and get groceries, sit in the bushes and laugh as they opened up the door and saw these groceries sitting there, and praise Jesus. And we'd say, oh, okay, great. And this guy, this sponsor, he'd say, now, son, you can't tell anybody about this. And I'd said, why? He says, because it'll undo it. And I said, okay, well, and the next day, everybody in Hamilton knew about it. It wasn't me telling anybody, and so the point there is, if you got a sponsor, just do what he says. Don't do what he does, So the first several years I was in this guy's back pocket, and I had a love affair with you like you wouldn't believe. We were down at the Irish Social Club for dances, and there was conferences, and that's the way it was. And I loved it. And because I had this relationship with you, my life just got better. And what I mean by that was, inside, the madness had stopped. And on the outside, the crime had stopped, at least getting caught anyways, had stopped. And my family and everybody, after 3.5 years, invited me back for Christmas dinner and stuff. After 3.5 years of sobriety, but I stayed with you guys at the Irish Social Club. I went to Gail Greenwoods, who ran our central office, for dinner. This is what we did. It was a strong fellowship. Man, you guys had me in it. I'm telling this for a reason, because there was a shift. And over the period of this, not first 9 years, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. I became educated. I got one of them job things, jobs. You get like a check and stuff. I got one of those things. I had a little girl, and I fell in love for the first time in my life. And I knew that somebody loved me. First time ever in my life at 9 years sober, I knew that Alcoholics Anonymous and being sober was all about love. First, I knew it was all about not drinking. Then I discovered it was all about love. That's what it was about. And so I reveled in that for a couple of years. And then I started hearing some guys around the Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to the Friday night discussion, Friday Wayside group, John. I went to groups like that. I went to the Thursday night Victoria Park, the Friday night Wayside group, Saturday night Delta group, where you could be guaranteed one thing, not a God message. You could be guaranteed to fight. You get in a scrap. And it was beautiful. I thought that was the A&As. I didn't know there was people out there actually loving on each other. We were scrapping. It was great. It was a beautiful thing. Then you go to the club on the Saturday night after the Delta group and straighten it all out and play some ping pong. And son, I went to meetings all the time. I didn't go to these meetings where I didn't know about this God thing. And I met these guys talking about capital G God, and it freaked me out a little bit, but I thought, I've been here a little while, and it's talking about God. So I thought, well, that's what it's all about. It's all about God. So I started reading spiritual books, running through the bush naked. Yeah. Doing that Robert Bly screaming stuff. We're doing all kinds of native sweats back then. Jimmy R was taking us into another real white guy taking me into a teepee, and we're burning stuff, and we're getting, it's burning steaming rocks and stuff. Looking for something, and that was at 12, 13, 14 years sober. And I have had, again, this amazing run with AA. I'm speaking all the time. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a relationship with the people in it that I think is real. I've grown up with people. My family life I've become the go-to guy in my family because I'm not breaking the law anymore, I suppose. And all of a sudden, everything's looking good. And I run into Mark. And some of you know my story. I run into Mark at a hotel room, and he says, "You're asleep dreaming, you're awake." He says, "I could help you with these steps if you want." I said, "Steps? What steps?" I didn't know what two-stepping was. Don't drink and help people. I knew what that was, but I didn't. You guys didn't heard me. I just told you my story. There were no steps. I wouldn't take any of the steps. There was no steps to be taken. Nobody was taking anybody through the steps. There was just no steps. So Mark said, "I'll take you through the steps." So he got me through the first four. He put me into the fourth step. I did inventory for the first time. It set my life ablaze. I now learned about the earnestness and the need for a power. He asked me when I was in the hotel room, he says, "Do you now believe you're willing to believe?" And I said, "I do." And it was a Bush League pinch hitter God that I had the whole time I'd been sober. When I got in trouble, I blamed God. When I got out of trouble, I took the credit. It was a very simple relationship. It was a very simple relationship. And so that's what we say when we ask that question when we're in respite care, when we bring a newcomer, "Do you now believe or are you willing to believe?" And he could tell that I actually was willing to believe. And he said, "Well, your proposition is the second step proposition. Is God everything or is he nothing? What's your choice?" And I had never been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in this way. And like Bill on page 13 in his bed, I said, "It has to be something. It's got to be God. There has to be something." And we said a third step prayer together. And the first time in my life, I got reconnected to that God that came to me in that cell that day in a whole different way. He was the father and I was a child. He was the director and I was the actor. He was the principal and I was the agent. And I knew that when I got up off my feet. And anybody who knows me can tell you that my life changed on that day. My Alcoholics Anonymous life changed. And I mean, all the behaviors that I'm talking in 14 years of sobriety that you can speak against, whether it's robbing, stealing, lying, philandering, all those things, that was my AA sober life. But God damn it, I didn't drink today. Understand what I'm saying? And I get pats on the back from the old geezers and Alcoholics Anonymous. "Well, did you drink today?" Well, no, and it was a good day. No, it wasn't. No, it was not. I probably should have got drunk. We have a little higher, objective here in Alcoholics Anonymous, is to live by spiritual means. And I don't know how long it takes to get there, but I was hanging around with you for a long time. I'm talking about this stuff because about self-reliance. I'm talking about that because of self-reliance. Sandy said many years ago, he said, someone walked up to him and he had been talking about the things in his relationship with God that he believed in. And the individual that was listening to him just sat waiting and thinking he was baiting him and said, so tell me, you really believe all that stuff? You really believe all that stuff you're telling? You believe that there's a God that loves you, that there is a power that will invest itself in your life, and that you can become happy, joyous, and free as a result of living by the dictates of that power? You really believe that? And Sandy said, geez, I don't know, but I've actually come to rely on it. That's what Sandy said back. I've come to rely on it. And if I can't say anything else here, I'm just going to say there better be a God. Because every single thing that's in my life now of any importance has come from this power. And every single time that I am immersed and engaged in the process of anything good in my life, it's in honor of that power. And I have come to rely on that power. Now, a lot of people think that when we get into this God reliance thing and we give up self-reliance, we're like the hole in the donut. We just sit still and nothing happens. Is that anybody's experience? is that really anybody? Only the untaught, tried, and untested will sit on the others and be in front of that and say, well, that's probably what's going to happen. Anybody who's on the other side of it says, there's not enough time in the day. I wish I was back to living by my will, because it was like, donuts and Survivor and that ordering pizza at midnight and eating ice cream and not worrying about a whole lot. That's my will. God's will is very different. So it says we're doing it. Tasha says here, it says we're gonna this thing about reliance. Well, if I go back, there's a direct link in between steps 2 and 3 and this proclamation that's made in the 11th step. I just want to wrap that up. At 14 years sober, I set about a life and engaged in the process of the steps. And as soon as I began to carry that message to other alcoholics, my life began to change, and I began to feel the power, the presence of God flowing through me. It wasn't anything that I could deny. And the thing about it, it was flowing through me. There was no stop. Like I had no stoppers. The obstacles, the pomp, the worship, the calamity, those things began to come and go. But I began to engage in a process of the 12 steps that began to really address those things. And I began to learn some things here, especially in around the range of 15, 18, 20 years sober, about the 10th step that could keep me in the game forever, for good and for always. It could keep me with an invariable open channel for the most part. And I don't make any presumptions of being inspired all the time. Although when I do that, when that does happen, there is absurd things that happen in my life. It's called spiritual. It's called that spiritual arrogance, that spiritual pride. When I start thinking I got this, I've lost it. And that's really what happens to me in this spiritual world. However, I can always recognize, Bob D always talks about the Lamplighter Story. And if you guys haven't ever heard the Lamplighter Story, it's about this relationship with God is very, very simple. And in the old days, when there was a small town and a small village below in the hills, if you sat up on the hillside at dusk and just watched, you could see the lamplighter going from post to post to post and lighting the lamps. That's how they lit the lamps. You remember that, eh, John? They just put the stick up there and lit the lamps. Yeah. See? So now the thing about it, when it got dark, you could see where he had been. You could see the lamp, but you couldn't see where he was. But you could always see where he had been. And this is what happens when you get this connection with the power, and you're living, when you're relying on this power and you're living in the lap of this power. It doesn't look like exercise or it doesn't look like a discipline, or it's actually the results are just flowing. And we have a thing in the 10th and 11th steps. And when I retire at night, when I get on my knees, when I look back in my day, when I try to check what's going on, I can actually see where God's been, and I can see where he hasn't been. Which is often much more difficult to sort of comprehend than where he's been now. I'm just like, man, are we still there? Are we still doing that? But this thing about the reliance in the second step, if you think about, we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. there's a supposition there that you're at a turning point, and you really are. It says this is a rallying point for most AAs, but we're standing at that turning point. God either is or he isn't. We're going to get into that proclamation right there. But we're going to stand there, and we're forced with the idea of reliance. We're forced with the idea that God, a power greater than self, can restore us to sanity. I can't do that. It has to be a power greater than self. Self-reliance will not work. It won't work for this. It will not work for this. And when we get into pages to 60 to 63, and we're talking about the right relationship with that power, it's always subjective. It's not like if you're walking, it goes on in the end. It says if we're walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, it talks about when you're doing that together with another man. But this thing about God being your co-pilot and all that stuff, I remember seeing a bumper sticker at the old conferences and say, God is my co-pilot. And then I saw another one, Charlie, Easy Does It Charlie got another one that says, if God's your co-pilot, you're in the wrong seat. That's true. I mean, like we're going to follow the dictates of a higher power. We're not going to, switch every once in a while. We'll lead today and you lead tomorrow. We're going to sort of fall into this reliance. And then the second step, we're directed towards the understanding of to some degree of this reliance. But what I wanted to talk about here is, I think I had separated it. No, hold on. Stay here with me. Don't go anywhere. So on page 68, in our fear inventory, how many people in here have been touched and are touched by fear to any degree? And you discovered that through inventory. How many people, put your hands up, play along. Come on, Nikki, wake up. Okay, so you've been touched by fear. We talk about it as being a needle corroding thread, and everybody says our lives are shot through it. And so many, it's one of our manifestations. And most people fear, if it doesn't show up in resentment, it dictates their life. And what we're asked here is we're going to review our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. So we're going to look at our fears, and in that, it starts talking about what we're talking about here today, about reliance. It says, perhaps there's a better way. We're now on a different basis, and that basis is trusting and relying upon God. Now, I've worked with people before who don't have an understanding or a relationship with God yet to this point. This is where we're really introducing in the first time in our literature, the first time in our steps to the capital G. This is the first time where we're saying you got to have a power greater than yourself, as it talked about in the second step, in order to proceed through this. Is we're on a different basis now and trusting and relying upon God. And a lot of guys will say, well, I don't believe in God. And I'll say, okay, you might not believe in God, but why are you doing this? You wrote a whole bunch of resentment inventory. You got on your knees with me and did a third step prayer. You answered the question in step 2. You conceded to your innermost self. Why did you come? What are you doing? Well, I don't know. I said, why don't we go with that? Why don't we just go with that, you defiant bastard? The defiance is the outstanding characteristic of the alcoholic. And all of a sudden, the guy's running on autopilot because he met me a week and a half ago. And it's like, he's running on autopilot. So why don't we just go with that then, man? Why don't we just go with that? So we're in the world to play the role he assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, and humbly rely upon him. So we humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? How important is that information that you'll be given right there? So when you go to the page 11, 86 to 88, which you asked me to talk about, and it says that we rely upon God. Hang on a second. Where is it? Where is it, guys? I didn't even have it marked in my book here. Anybody know? Nobody's going to help me. Everybody's going to stare at me and look and watch me panic here. Nobody's going to help me. What page is that on?
Anyone have a big book?
You guys are following along with me for the last 25 minutes with no big book, nodding your head and looking down like it's right in front of you. Is that what you're doing? Oh God, this Zoom has to go. And the problem is I'm going to get to where I was getting and I'll forget why I was getting there. So here's the thing. So you end up in this place where you're introduced to the concept that God is God and you're not. It's a subjective relationship. You're going to take this position. And then all through the next several days, weeks, and years of your life, that will be your ongoing dilemma. That will be your ongoing battle. That will be your ongoing points of consternation. You know, people can talk about a child being sick or a marriage going south or a financial difficulty coming about. And the only issue is, how is your relationship with God? You can sit and you listen to you can listen to the clamors. You can listen to the worldly sort of clamors. You can listen to that. And that's what we do. Why? Because we're empathic and we give a damn. That's one of the things that's really interesting about us, is that we care at a deep, deep level, and mostly about ourselves. But every once in a while, we're able to squeak out a little bit of sort of energy for somebody else. And you listen. So you listen to those things. But at the end of the conversation, at the end of any healthy, good conversation and recovery, the question should be, how's your relationship with the power? How's your relationship with God? Again, I'll refer to Sandy. Sandy used to say, who's stepping on your hose? It's always about your connection with the power. And it doesn't matter what life circumstances are. It doesn't matter. So this reliance that they're talking about in 86 to 80 is that we've come to rely on it, which means we're behind it. We're behind it now, and it's ahead of us. That we are now going to walk into this world and not looking back and going, oh my God, please help me with that pain, or oh my God, please help me. We're going to actually be in front of it and walk into this world and rely that it's God's will that's taking place all the time. It's God's plan that's being executed all the time. We've come to rely on it. In step 3, we've learned that, man, we're going to be in this life. It's a life of reliance. It's a life of reliance. And our 12 and 12 says belief means reliance, not defiance. So if you believe that you believe in God, what did you hold up there, Johnny? You found it 87. Yeah, I'll find it in a minute. It'll come right over me. I picked the reading and I don't even know where it is. One sentence and I can't find it. But anyway, so we rely upon this God. Now, this is not a coincidence. It's in this place in the 11th step. So we're having these experiences in the 10th step, which are directly linked to the 11th step. And then the 11th step is starting to tell you about what it's going to be like throughout your day, what it's going to be like over a period of a couple of days, what it's going to be like over a period of a pocket of time. There's no time in the spiritual world, but it starts to say things like, it works. It really does. It says things like that. God reliance works. And when we're doing a 4-step with someone and we talk about the fear inventory, we say, well, wasn't it because self-reliance failed? And a lot of people say to me, I don't know what that means, man. I don't know what that means. And we talk about self-reliance and we try to explain it to them. You try to explain self-reliance to somebody. The way I do it is with the bicycle. If you guys remember when you were little learning to ride a bike, do you remember that? Remember learning to ride a bike when you were just a kid? Do you remember you were afraid? Did that show up on your fear list? Probably not. It probably didn't show up on your fear list. Why? Because self-reliance worked. So we go through our lives and we attend to these things, and self-reliance has been excellent so far as it's concerned, but it doesn't go far enough. And here we are walking into the sunlight of the spirit here, where life calamity is going to come our way, and we need to rely upon that God. And some of you guys, and I apologize to anybody who's heard the story before, but I need to talk about this because I believe that all the answers to good living are tied into the 10th step, and all the reasons that I can live this way are tied into the 11th step. That all the explanation for why my life is so wonderful and abundant is in the 11th step, but it's the 10th step exercises that came to set me ablaze. So I lived this life in Alcoholics Anonymous, having met Mark and gone through the steps and carrying a message for 14, 15, 16 years post 14 years sober. So I'm 26, 28, 30 years sober. I'm driving down to my meeting one night and I get a phone call that my daughter's hung herself. Some of you guys have heard me tell this story. I want to tell this story because to understand about what reliance looks like in front of it, it looks like this. It looks like this. Is I get a call that my daughter's hung herself and I lose my shit. I'm in my Camry. I pull the car over at the variety store in Stone Church. I'm only a quarter mile away from a meeting, but I start smashing on my dash. I smash the mirror in my car and I smash my steering wheel and I'm losing it. I'm in my default. I'm in my default of anger and rage. And all of a sudden, it floods over me. It says, I asked God at once to remove this. It just flooded over my consciousness. I had lived that way for several years in the practice and the disciplines of that, but it was not there when this information came immediately, but it came to me, probably because I had been living in the disciplines of that for all of those years. And so it just flooded over me. And I asked God, please take this from me. And I put my car into drive and went down the rest of the way. And Brian was in the parking lot of the Prince George Group. I fell into his arms and I told him what happened. He says, what do you want to do? I said, there's some drunks here. Let's do what we got to do. So for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, we had a meeting of all meetings. I sat on my hands, kept my mouth shut. And then when the meeting was over, he said, let's go. And we went down to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, Leslie was there. She was crying. She was pretty upset. There was other family there. And I just held her and I whispered into her ear, it's going to be okay. It's because I knew it was. And when I went up to the doctors and the nurses and I thanked them for attending to my daughter, and the prognosis was not good, and it still wasn't, but she lived. But I went and I asked if I could see her, and I put my hand underneath her head. I kissed her on the forehead and I whispered into her ear, it's going to be okay. And it's because I knew it was. And Sarah never recovered from that suicide attempt. She's never been the same since. She's a vivacious, beautiful, incredibly energetic addict, alcoholic on the street, in constant collision with people. But she's your favorite in Alcoholics Anonymous. Of all my daughters, she's your guy's favorite because she's one of us. That's why, but she's your favorite. Now, Sarah lived. I came out of that with a whole new understanding of this power. I came out of that understanding with a whole new understanding of reliance, the difference between self-reliance and God reliance. So let me tell you what happened. A couple of weeks before, after the COVID, we got hit with COVID. My oldest daughter, Dana, was in an ATV and she flipped it over and she banged her head. And she had to go to the hospital in Tilsonburg. And when there, they discovered something in her brain, in her head. And they immediately directed her to Hamilton General. And she found out she had a massive tumor in her brain. And her husband, who's a beautiful man, is not equipped. He's not equipped for this stuff. He was crying himself. And she said, I got to call Marty. I got to call Marty. So she calls me at work. I'm at my desk at work. And it's a small office. And right as soon as the call comes, I go into default. I swear to God, and I know none of you spiritual giants do this, but I looked up and I said, really? Again? We're going to do this again? And my rage kicked in. And 40 seconds later, I went, holy shit, have I learned nothing? And I got up from my desk and I walked into an adjacent room and I closed the door and I dropped on my knees and I said, God, please take this from me. She's on her way down here right now. I have to be of use to her. Please remove this from me. And I got up off my knees and I talked to my coworker for 30 seconds, 40 seconds and told her about the call I just got. I'll be back in a couple of minutes, touch base with you. By the time I walked down the stairs, I had my chin up, my chest out, and I was ready to do God's business. She came around the corner in a truck. She dropped out of the truck and just fell into my arms and melted. She sobbed, and I mean sobbed. And I was able to hold her as she sobbed. And I whispered into her ear, it's going to be okay, because I knew it was. I don't just talk about reliance. I looked it up in the dictionary for you guys. I started finding all kinds of Bill Wilson quotes from his emotional letter there. And I wanted to give you guys everything. And you know what? I have a lifetime of experience of being run on self-will and self-reliance. And I've got a brand new lease on life run on God reliance. I can tell you what works and what doesn't. I can tell you what's effective and useful to others and what isn't. These things that have happened in my life, they're not sad stories. They're tools. They have become absolute tools that I can use to help people. There are parents and people on here who've lost children in their lives. And I am able to sit and talk with them about my close calls and still waiting. We're still waiting news. It's a bad cancer that she has. And then we found out it's in a whole lot of other places too. And my family's had to rally around and try to be there for each other as best we can. You know, it's an insane bunch of crew, the insane crew I have, but we're all doing the best we can. There's no way that that's possible without God's love and God's grace. There's no way that that's possible without a reliance upon that power. And where does that come from? That might be a conscious sort of decision to turn my will or to make a decision. That might be that conscious decision. But I think my decision is born out of the second step. Absolute, undeniable anguish, pain, and desperation. That's why I believe. I have felt that enough times in my life that I know that that's the only place to go. There's nothing that can remove that, take that away, or make that of good use other than God. Anything that I've managed through myself, financial difficulties, relationship issues, it's usually been through lying, deceit, dishonest ways, period. And yeah, I've got away with it and I've got through it. I was here 14 years living on a life of self-will, if you can imagine, not drinking, clear mind, committing all kinds of atrocities upon people. I've had to clean all that stuff up. When the crap hits the fan today, I have a way out. I have a way out. It begins with God and it ends with God. And the beauty of it is, I talked to you about this incredible weekend I just had with these men going through the steps, and Scott Lee inadvertently flew in from our friend Olaf ran through a little bit of difficulty, and Scott Lee said something I remember hearing many years ago, and I'm going to share it with you. He said I said to Scott, I hugged him at the front of the room and I said, buddy, what are you doing here? He said, Marty, he says, you can fake caring, but you can't fake showing up. Have you guys ever heard that? He's from Nashville. His sponsee was in trouble and he showed up. And he came up to that meeting that we were at, and he gave we had a page 112 meeting and a conversation about a reliance upon God that was absolutely wonderful. I was already in my heart and chest well prepared for a sit down with you guys to talk about relying upon God. We've come to rely upon it. We put that in the book there to say to people, so tell me, this God, really? Like, you really believe all this shit? You really believe all this stuff? Well, I've come to rely on it. It better be true. It all better be real because I rely on it. And I don't know, I got to be honest with you. I really believe in this power. I do. And I feel connected and inspired most times. But it's like, what if I'm just crazy? What if none of it's true? What if none of it's real? What if it's just all some funky thing that I read in a book with you guys, and all of a sudden it's just grown into this? What if? Well, I'm good with that. I'm good with that because my life is a life of service today. And when I'm thinking about you, I'm not thinking about me. And this thing about God relying, that God can only have me when I'm like that. When I am wrapped up in self, I'm not only not relying on God, the communication's busted. It's not there. But when I'm doing this, like, I will shoot off my mouth like this, turn off the video screen, and I'll get muted there shortly, and then we're going to have a little time together. And my heart is going to be humbled and absolutely yearning for your love and connectedness, not for your applause or your praise. But the fact that I need you to be connected to that power to which I can rely upon for everything. I need you. And that's where I go with this, Ali. I got nothing else to say. I don't know if I was 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half, I don't know. But I want to hear from other people because this is important stuff. And I thank you very much for listening.
Good